One thing that really separates the Super Mario Bros. Series from the rest of the pack is its power-ups, which add a whole nother level to the gameplay, allowing your character to get a boost to help you progress without dying. Today I thought it would be a good idea to look at the absolute best and absolute worst from each and every entry in the franchise, going through exactly what makes them good or bad, and how they change Mario throughout his adventures in Mushroom Kingdom. Oh yeah, before I get started, my name is Copycat, and if you haven't yet, then please subscribe to my channel, hitting that bell to stay notified when I upload new videos. The very first game to be released was Super Mario Bros. For the NES, being the place where power-ups made their debut, showing up in either Magic Mushroom, Fire Flower, or Starman form. I guess that the Fire Flower is the best, as it allows you to kill enemies in a completely different but safer way, as you just shoot out fireballs that travel along the ground until it hits something. The only way for this power-up to disappear is if you take damage or lose a life in any way, shape, or form. But if you're careful, you can keep it for a long time, which will help you greatly through certain sections of the game. Now, I don't really think that there's a worse power-up from this particular entry, as each one performs a specific purpose in helping you along your journey. Of course, with the Magic Mushroom transforming you into Super Mario, letting you break usually unbreakable bricks, and of course, the Star, which allows you to become invincible, albeit for a short time, although it's still a positive experience. The next game to be released in Western markets was Super Mario Bros. 2, and contains one really strange power-up that's also its best in the stopwatch. This only shows up in this specific entry, where plucking the 5th blade of grass that would reveal a full vegetable will give you the watch, letting you freeze all enemies on screen for a short period of time. Now, I'll admit this isn't too helpful, as its occurrence is quite rare, but it's still an amazing feature that I wish was used much more in the series. The star also appears in this title, but here only if you've collected 5 cherries in a single stage, acting basically the same at least, allowing you to become invincible for a short period of time. These cherries also appear in pretty much every level of the game, so it's always worth going for them, as it's definitely a great help. I guess I'd have to say that the regular old mushroom is the worst power-up of the game, as it just gives you an extra vitality point, lasting until you end the level you find it in. This would be considered good if it lasted through the entire game instead, and maybe would have been a better way to count lives than just gaining 1-ups. The finale of the original NES trilogy is Super Mario Bros. 3, which contains a few power-ups I think are worth mentioning as good, starting with the Super Leaf. Collecting this turns Mario into his raccoon version, where running, then jumping, and pressing the tail whip button sends him flying up in the air. This is only for a brief period of time before you slowly begin to ascend and reach the ground again, but is vastly important in reaching higher up areas. Now, if you're able to get the secret P-Wing power-up, then you'll actually be able to fly indefinitely for the level you use it in, as if you try to use it after in other stages, you'll just be in normal raccoon form. Finally, there's also the Tanuki suit, that looks and acts similarly as if you're powered up with the Super Leaf, but also allows you to turn into a stone statue that's invulnerable to basically all attacks. This is very rare, and only shows up a few times in the game, but always brought me joy when I was able to find it. On the flip side of things, the only power-up I'd say is sorta bad is the frog suit, as it just isn't as advantageous as it could be. Yes, it allows you to move much more smoothly underwater, but it also limits your ability to move out of it, leading to some very awkward feeling controls that I just never quite liked. Nintendo must have felt the same way, as it never shows up again in any other game in the franchise, but I am hoping to see the return of a better form of it someday. The true sequel to the NES original, at least in Japan, got released in North America years later as part of the Super Mario All-Stars collection, titled The Lost Levels, which contains a very limited amount of power-ups throughout it, so really any of the core 3 are good to find, as that at least gives you a chance to live a bit longer. This is because this game was intentionally made as a much tougher version of the original title, adding harder platforming sections, insane enemy placements, and of course, less collectibles, leading to the loss of way more lives. Now, this game introduces one of the worst power-ups in the series, the Poison Mushroom, that when collected actually depowers Mario, or straight out kills him if he's already in a small form. This replaces normal power-ups in certain instances, making it seem like you're about to get something useful, but in the end, it turns out harmful. The very first handheld game in the series was Super Mario Land for the Game Boy, which introduced the Super Ball power-up, differing slightly from the Fire Flower's projectiles, as here they bounce off the walls and ceilings. This Super Ball also lets you collect any coins that it touches along its trajectory, adding another reason why it deserves to be showcased in this video. I honestly tried my hardest to come up with the worst power-up, but this game is so limited that it just doesn't have one. But if you think that I might have left one out, then please let me know in the comments below. The only entry from the SNES that we're going to look at is Super Mario World, where my favorite power-up from it is definitely the Cape Flower, granting the player with a cape that can be used to fly around the stages. After you're done flying, you can then use the cape to pretty much float indefinitely, by pressing back on the D-pad with the right timing to catch more air, which then lets you reach certain incredibly tough spots. Also, the cape can be used as a weapon by spinning it towards your enemies to defeat them, adding a whole nother useful purpose to this great collectible. I think most people will agree that by far the worst power-up is the P-Balloon, which literally turns the mustachioed man into a balloon, allowing you to float through certain levels for a short period of time. You can't really do anything at all in this form, other than move around in mid-air, usually over top a void. And this isn't always an easy thing, as you have to continuously collect a bunch of these to stay alive, while also avoiding attacks from enemies. The second game in the short-lived Super Mario Land series came out for the Game Boy in 1992, where I'd have to say that the best power-up from it is the carrot, which turns Mario into his bunny form. This then lets you flutter a bit in mid-air, allowing you to not only control Mario a bit better, but also lets you reach certain places you otherwise wouldn't be able to. I get that this isn't as complex as something like the Super Leaf, but for the limitations of the system, this is pretty well done. Again, I can't really say there's a bad power-up from this entry, as the Game Boy didn't really allow for anything too spectacular, so they didn't fail spectacularly, as most are pretty simplistic and do their job pretty well, but again, let me know if I forgot one. The first 3D-based game to be released in the series was Super Mario 64 for the N64, which replaced traditional power-ups with special caps, the best being the red winged one that allows you to fly. Well, I guess this is more like glorified gliding, but it doesn't mean it still isn't good, as this at least allows you to explore the course you're in from a completely different perspective. To fly, you either have to triple jump, or get launched by a cannon. And again, this is just sort of gliding, but if you dive down then quickly come back up, then you'll sort of gain a bit of height. My choice for the worst power-up in this game is the invisible cap, which turns Mario, of course, both invisible and intangible, allowing you to run through certain walls. Unfortunately, being in this form only lasts for a very short period of time, and is only utilized in a few spots in the game, with me wishing it was a bit more fleshed out. Super Mario Sunshine for the GameCube was the next game to be released in the series, eliminating the use of regular power-ups, but introducing the FLUDD as their replacement, being able to find different attachments for your device to help you along your journey. One of the best of these nozzles that you can put on the FLUDD is the default hover one, allowing you to travel above ground in a straight line as long as you have the right trigger held down while you do it. Eventually the effect of the water will wear off, and you'll slowly ascend to the ground. But if you use this in conjunction with your platforming skills, then you can reach some very hard to get areas. Another good one that you can unlock if you gain 25 shine sprites is the turbo nozzle, that when charged up allows Mario to run at incredibly fast speeds. You actually begin to run so fast that you can travel right over water as if it were solid ground, which is needed to collect certain coins and shine sprites. In my opinion, the worst of these that you can come across is the rocket nozzle, which becomes unlocked once you gain 30 shine sprites, allowing you to launch Mario high up in the air. Even though this comes in handy to reach certain areas, it just isn't utilized enough for me to consider it as fun. Nintendo would eventually return the franchise to its 2D platforming roots with the release of New Super Mario Bros. For the DS, that added a few power-ups that I want to showcase as good, starting with the Mega Mushroom. This somewhat rare but powerful collectible transforms Mario into a giant, taking up basically the entire screen, allowing you to go on a destructive rampage while also becoming invulnerable. Unfortunately, this only lasts for a short period of time, but it's still a major highlight when you are able to find it in a block. Another power-up that's introduced in this title is the Blue Shell, that essentially transforms Mario into a Koopa along with a few of its abilities. The main one is the shell dash, that when ducking enters you into the shell and allows you to slide across the floor, breaking any bricks and defeating any enemies in your way. Another upside is that Shell Mario is invulnerable to almost every attack except from bosses, and of course falling into a pit, but that's pretty much a death in every situation. Now my pick for the worst power-up quite obviously goes to the mini mushroom, which turns Mario into a miniature version of himself with more downsides than perks. One bad thing is that you literally become a one-shot, meaning that even though it's a power-up, it doesn't revert you to your small form if you take damage. Instead, just killing you and you lose a life. The thing that I think is the worst, however, is your need to be equipped with this power-up during certain boss fights, as it's the only way to find the secret exits and reach certain worlds. This is something that's not only hard to do in this state, but also isn't apparent on your first playthroughs, so you'll definitely need to backtrack if you want to experience everything in this game. I mean, there are upsides like you can walk on water, stand on donut blocks, and platform a bit more smoother as you jump higher, but it just isn't enough to counter the downsides. The next 3D-oriented game to come out was Super Mario Galaxy for the Wii, containing 3 fun power-ups I want to look at, starting with the Boo Mushroom. Collecting this strange thing allows Mario to turn into a ghost version of himself, having the ability to turn intangible so you can phase through walls on your way to rescue your brother. What's also cool is that if you come in contact with any light source, then you'll be depowered, so there is a bit of a risk involved when having to use it. The second power-up that I always have tons of fun using is the Ice Flower, which allows you to freeze enemies, as well as any substance below you that might be present along the planets you're on. You're then able to skate on the area that you froze over, adding a whole nother mechanic to this already pretty unique power-up. The final good one that I think is worth looking at is the Bee Mushroom, which, if you haven't guessed, turns you into a bumblebee, allowing you to buzz around the Honey Hive Galaxy. In this form, you're also able to stick to the honeycomb walls, as well as being able to land in certain flowers that usually close when you come close. To this day, this power-up still is a standout when compared to the others in the series, but I might be a bit biased, as it reminds me of some of my favorite parts from my favorite game, Banjo-Kazooie. The only power-up I'm going to designate as bad is the Red Star, which allows you to fly around, albeit in the very limited spots that it shows up. Initially, that's just the Gateway Galaxy, where you have to collect 100 purple coins to gain the star. Once you do this, you'll then be able to use it in the Comet Observatory to more easily gain access to different rooms. But this really isn't a major change, and at the end of the day, isn't really needed. The second game in the new Super Mario Bros. Sub-series came out for the Wii in 2009, containing 2 power-ups I want to look at in this video, starting with the Propeller Shroom. When equipped with this, Mario is then able to zip up to the top of the screen by quickly shaking the Wiimote, acting like one of those pullable helicopter toys that can actually get pretty high up in the air. On top of that, when you ground pound, you perform a drill spin that can kill enemies and break blocks. The other I want to show off is the Penguin Suit, which not only allows you to throw snowballs to freeze foes, but also slide on your belly to travel on ice, lets you swim more efficiently in water, as well as letting you be way more sure-footed on slippery surfaces. This actually helps out a lot in this particular entry and the Wii U sequel, as both have mini winterized themed levels you need to complete. I guess by default, I have to put the Ice Flower as this entry's worst power-up, only because it's essentially a worse version of the Penguin Suit, only here allowing you to throw snowballs. I'm not sure why Nintendo would add 2 very similar power-ups, with one just being a way better version than the other. Next, we're going to look at probably my favorite game in the series, Super Mario Galaxy 2 for the Wii, which has 2 very unique power-ups I want to look at on the good side of things, starting with the Rock Mushroom. In Rock Mario form, if you shake the Wiimote, then you'll morph into a boulder and roll very quickly forward, defeating any enemies in your way, as well as destroying any obstacles that you usually can't move. This is the most fun to use during your boss fight against the Rolodillo, needing to slam into its exposed areas to deal damage. The other very interesting power-up is the Cloud Flower, which lets Mario walk on clouds that would usually result in him falling right through. Also, by shaking the Wiimote, you can create your own clouds to platform on, which is needed in many situations to progress forward. The one power-up I wanted to mention as bad is the Blimp Fruit, which when eaten by Yoshi, inflates your Dino Buddy until he starts to slowly float. As he rises upwards, he expels air from his mouth, and will eventually run out, unable to go any higher. I just don't find anything too special about the specific fruit, and I have way more fun using the dash pepper or the bulberry. Nintendo would eventually blend the 2D and 3D worlds with Super Mario 3D Land for the 3DS, where the only good power-up I want to mention is the really cool boomerang flower. This turns Mario into a boomerang bro, allowing him to throw the projectile to not only beat enemies, but also grab collectibles, which is a nice touch. It unfortunately doesn't show up as much as I'd like, but it definitely works well in the 3D realm. The worst power-ups of this title are definitely the two assist-based ones, showing up depending on how many times you've died in a single level. The invincibility leaf appears if you've died 5 times in a row, turning you into White Tanuki Mario, who on top of being able to fly, also gains invincibility in that specific stage. And the P-Wing shows up if you've died 10 times in a row, granting you the completely overpowered ability of just being able to warp right to the goal pole, bypassing the entire level. In my opinion, these features ruin the gameplay, as you'll never get any better unless you do it yourself. The third installment of the new Super Mario Bros. Sub-series is for some reason given the designation of the second game. But anyways, the best power-ups from it are for sure the gold-based ones that you can find pretty much everywhere in this title. These are literally designed to give you dozens of coins just by doing things like killing enemies and bonking off bricks. But they don't give you invincibility, so if you take damage you'll still revert to normal form. The golden fire flower has a bit of an extra perk as the fireballs you shoot out do splash damage, meaning their attacks hit a wider radius than usual. Again, the worst power from this game is the assist one in the invincibility leaf, again showing up if you died 5 times in a row. This is just a cop-out and makes an already easy experience even easier. The final game of the new Super Mario Bros. Sub-series came out for the Wii U in 2012, where I'd have to say that both acorns are the best power-ups from it. The most common is the Super Acorn, which just transforms Mario into the regular flying squirrel, allowing you to glide for a short period of time before you inevitably touch the ground or a platform. The P Acorn is much more useful, as you have the ability to jump and glide indefinitely in mid-air through an entire stage, which really can come in handy in ones that are heavily platform-based. Again, I really couldn't think of a bad power-up from the specific entry, so if I really missed one, then let me know in the comments below. Another absolutely amazing game in the series is Super Mario 3D World for the Wii U, where I think it's easy to say that the Super Bell power-up, turning Mario into a cat, is the best. This form gives you the ability to swipe your claws at your enemies, as well as dive towards them to deal damage, as well as letting you climb up most surfaces to reach secretive areas. Not only is this a game-changing feature, but being a cat itself is just a cute addition, and Nintendo definitely knew exactly what they were doing. On the flip side of things, I think that the worst power-up is the strange double cherry, that multiplies your character into an exact, controllable copy. This is just needed to activate certain switches or move the Multivator conveyor belt, and at the end of the day, feels just a bit too gimmicky and a little bit too lackluster. Super Mario Odyssey for the Nintendo Switch is also a very interesting title, as usual power-ups are replaced by the capture mechanic, so I'm going to include these just for the sake of it, and say that one of my favorites is actually a Cheep Cheep. It's funny as one of the most boring enemies to face off against is actually one of the most fun to play as, where being able to swim freely underwater is an extremely satisfying experience, something you've never really done efficiently in the series. Another standout is definitely the T-Rex, where you can use the giant dinosaur's immense strength to destroy obstacles, defeat enemies, and just overall rampage through entire sections of levels. This just turns the game into a fun, chaotic experience, and I'll always remember the first time coming across it and being utterly surprised. The final standout capture that I want to mention is of course the big bad Bowser himself, where in his form you're able to swipe to destroy blocks, as well as breathe fire when entering the 8-bit realm. I really could go on forever about the best of these, but instead I'd love to know which ones you liked in the comments below. Now definitely one of the worst captures of this entire game are the cactuses. Cacti? Whatever. Where when captured you just need to move them out of the way to unveil a glowing spot on the ground. This is just an underwhelming thing that really isn't needed, and I either wish they gave the cactus a cooler ability, or at least made it look kinda goofy and funny. The final entry we're going to look at in this video is the Bowser's Fury game mode that was added alongside the re-release of Super Mario 3D World for the Switch, where definitely the best power-up you can find in Lake Lapcat is the Super Bell. It's really almost as if the entirety of this kingdom is designed with this power-up in mind, with mini challenges made extremely easier with the use of it. Also, the Giga version of the bell turns you into Giga Cat Mario, which leads to an incredibly awesome fight against Bowser in a kaiju-style battle. The worst power-up of this game mode is just the regular old Super Mushroom, only because power-ups are pretty common, so it's just better to use the more useful ones than being able to grow in size. I'd rather be able to shoot fire or throw a boomerang than just jump on an enemy. Alright, that's going to be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this one. If you did, please leave a like, comment below what you thought about it, and of course subscribe to my channel. Also, please go follow my Instagram at CopyCatGamer. There I upload some cool clips and items from my collection that you won't see anywhere else. Hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!